Hello, and welcome to my channel. I've been a big fan of Humble Bundle since the Indie Bundle days. It's a great way to fill out your library, find some deals, and discover some hidden gems, but it can be a bit overwhelming. My goal today is to take a look at the August 2024 Humble Choice. I'll be taking a look at each game, which means playing it for around an hour, giving my first impressions, coupled with going over some juicy Steam data to help you figure out if specific games are worth playing, or even if the whole bundle's worth it for you. I'll start from the bottom of the bundle and work my way up, and we'll see if the August 2024 Humble Choice bundle is any good. Also, before I get into the nitty-gritty of the bundle, I just want to say that it really sucks that the publishing arm of Humble Games, got shuttered in July. They were really a top-tier publisher with stuff like A Hat in Time, Coral Island, Forager, Slay the Spire, and the brand new Path of the Teal Lotus. Good luck to those 36 people who lost their jobs, along with the others who've fallen victim to the instability of this industry. It's been a rough year for my favorite hobby. Anyway, the first game on this list at the bottom of the bundle is This Means Warp. It gave me some FTL vibes when I checked out the trailer, and you can tell that FTL is this game's defining influence. The key difference is that you only play as a single crew member in This Means Warp, and everything is in real time. While I haven't personally played Overcooked, this game also gives me those vibes. Just chaos in the kitchen versus chaos on a spaceship. But just like Overcooked, this game is better with friends. I was surprised, however, at how much fun I was having on my own, and the AI crewmates are still serviceably helpful. The game plays a little bit sluggishly as your player-controlled crew member isn't very fast, but you quickly learn the pattern of bringing ammo to your guns to charge and fire them, as well as keeping repair kits handy to fix any damage to your ship. In my first attempt, I rushed to the boss fight in the first zone and was resoundingly defeated, but in my second attempt I found an additional crewmate that made the game much easier. I was definitely still learning the ropes after my second ship got destroyed, but after 50 minutes of playing, I had my head wrapped around the idea of the game and was actually having a good bit of fun. This Means Warp is a bit too obscure to have a Metacritic score, but it has a mostly positive review status on Steam. Overall, I think this game is clever enough in its own right to separate it from its inspirations, and especially for the bottom-built game of the bundle, it feels like a good addition and a strong start for our August Humble Choice. Next up is Universe for Sale, which is more or less a visual novel. I went into this one completely blind, which was a very good way to try it out. While the visual comic book style novel elements of this game are at the forefront of its gameplay, there are some light puzzles and point and click elements. Universe for Sale runs for about 5 or 6 hours according to howlongtobeat.com, and while I didn't go beyond the first hour of the game, I will give a light spoiler warning here if you want to skip to the next game and go in blind like I did. This game starts with a mother reading her daughter, Lila, a book. While I wouldn't guess that Lila is any older than 10, she's apparently in love with a pseudo-pretentious children's book about a boy lost to darkness. The mother reads a few pages, and then you jump to a strange planet sleeping on your face in the rain. You get up, and you go over to a tea shop where you get a little bit of world building. As you enter the shop, you pull down your hood for the first big reveal of the game. You're a walking skeleton with clown makeup named Master. The owner of the shop fills you in that you're on Jupiter, in the Jovian colony, which is under extreme duress, but no worries, he's got some tea and he'll hook you right up. You're waiting to meet a girl named Lila, who has the same name as the girl from the storybook sequence, and as far as I can tell, that's the only connection between the two segments, at least in the first hour. As you wait for Lila, you learn a little bit about sort of a holy war going on. You learn that you're part of, if not the leader, of some weird cult, and you meet a man with some fun-looking cats and a cool cyber orangutan named Bandar. Lila then shows up. You talk to her a little bit, expressing extreme interest in the tiny universes she can create. You soon have to leave the conversation to go do something, and it cuts back to the storybook segment. After this, you wake up again, face down, in the rain, again. However, now there's a revolution going on. Every time you wake up, your character has extreme amnesia and is just as surprised as you are to learn what's going on. Master borrows a gun from Bandar, our cyber orangutan friend from before, and starts chasing a disgruntled Lila. It's unclear how much time has passed since the last meeting, or really what is going on, but you end up needing to charge up the stun gun to shoot some robots that stand in your path. Lila eventually accidentally breaks her leg, and you help her to safety before a building falls on you. After that, you cut back to the storybook segment for a few more slightly pretentious pages of this dark children's book, and then you cut back to the Master waking up on the streets in a Jovian rainstorm. This time, you're friends with Lila again, and you're both going out with Bandar to the wind turbines where you're going to pick some podla fruit, the same fruit that flavored your tea from the initial tea house visit. You get to ride on Bandor's back as he climbs over and through the wind turbines, which is pretty cool, and the scene fades out with you learning a bit more about Lila's past, and it connects to another storybook segment. The fourth time Master woke up in a Jovian puddle, I'd hit about an hour of playtime and decided it was enough for now. My initial impression was mixed. I love the art style. It reminds me a bit of something like the new Ultros or Scavenger's Reign. I'm not a big fan of the point and click elements or just point and click in general, and I'm not usually a fan of visual novels, but the sci-fi art and cool vibe kept me invested. At times, the language of this game feels pretentious for no reason, and the minigames were kind of lame tack-ons, but the story was enjoyable overall. It has an 80 on Metacritic, which is pretty solid, and it has a very positive review status on Steam. There's a cool story here, and it seems like a good addition to this month's bundle. Now we're on to Diluvian Ultra. My first vibe check of this game is that it's a boomer shooter Doom-like with blood gore instead of hell gore. I'm mostly right. The first weapon that you get is a blood sword, so immediately it feels a bit more like Heretic or Hexen than straight up Doom, but that does change a little once you grab some guns. Anyways, you play a character, Attila, a blood prince, and you quickly discover that your tomb ship is covered and has been just defiled by foreign visitors. You run into a lot of robotic enemies, which kinda gave me System Shock vibes right away, but you eventually run into some humans too. Story-wise, this game isn't much more than like an over-the-top, violent kind of stop the intruders, with the eventual help of some other Hell Monarchs. Gameplay-wise, this game is very fast-paced, with quick movement, a solid double jump. The dash function is prioritized, especially so you can get up close and use the blood sword. The first few levels are kind of puzzly, but fortunately they aren't too challenging to tackle. You eventually grow your arsenal to include a few different weapon types, including some living weapons like your Squire Gun Bella, who's an insect larvae type thing. It's ironic that the whole living guns gag is going to happen twice in this bundle, once we get to High on Life. I had fun with this game, although I'm not usually drawn into boomer shooters. The modern control scheme, vibrant graphics, and beautiful artistic set pieces really did make this game fun to jump into, and if you're into this game, there's a lot to like here. I do, however, have a couple of complaints. There's this whole health armor system that only kind of makes sense. Some guns only do certain types of damage, and if they only do armor damage, they can't land the killing blow, so you'll need to do blood damage, which is kind of annoying. You can always slash with your sword with the F key, which I think is the intended solution to this problem. And it should feel good to do, but because it isn't reactive, I find myself slamming on the F key until something happens, until I finally swing the sword. It's kind of the same thing when you use the sword on its own, it can just be a little bit off. Your Squire Gun, Bella, also seems like it should be a cool gun to use, and it also does blood damage, but it's super inaccurate, and at the point where you're close enough to use Bella, you may as well be using the blood sword. As it often happens, with the bottom games of the bundle, this title is too obscure of a release to have been scored on Metacritic. Steam reviews have it at a very positive status, and they seem to be in line with my take. If you can get over some of the control idiosyncrasies, there is a good game waiting for you with Diluvian Ultra. Astral Ascent is the first game so far today that I've actually heard of before the bundle was released. It's an action roguelike based around the Western zodiac constellations like Scorpio, Libra, Virgo, and so forth. It's a pretty cool idea for how to riff on a familiar, yet fantastical idea, and the implementation of having each zodiac sign as a boss is quite clever. You play as either Isla, Kirin, Octave, or Kelly, and you go through levels that play a lot like Dead Cells, with a heavy dose of Hades for flavor, and just a touch of Rogue Legacy for, legacy. Your character has 4 interchangeable spells, as well as a signature spell and a basic attack. You can dash, double jump, and otherwise maneuver your way through the various levels that, again, play a lot like Dead Cells, but each stage is much smaller, and in between each stage you get to pick the next area based on the reward, just like in Hades. Also like Hades, story seems to be the key element of this roguelike, and all the hub world characters have something new to say after every run. That, and all the characters need to be sexy. Thanks, Hades. Because you can play as 4 different characters, when you interact with people in the hub world, each NPC interacts with your character individually, which is a nice touch. There was a lot of time and detail put into this system and these characters, and it really shows. The best of the character designs is of course the constellations, your boss battles. While I've already done some comparisons, I'll hit you with another. The boss battles feel a bit like Hollow Knight with complex patterns of enemy attacks to learn how to dodge and evade. These battles can be intense. I failed the first boss, Taurus, twice before finally completing it, although that same run I was able to take down Ares and nearly a third boss who I won't spoil in this preview. When you die, you get sunstones to use as a currency and buy upgrades, so each run is a little easier, and for me, it was easy just to get sucked into the beautiful pixel environments, engaging gameplay, and the roguelike progression mentality. My only real fault with this game is that trying to manage spells, gambits, and auras seems more complicated than it needs to be. The 4 spells rotate on a cycle, which is unique. I think it's a cool idea, but along with the gambits, it makes the system cumbersome to manage. Small qualms aside, I really enjoyed my time in Astral Ascent. The game is definitely my cup of tea, and it's wholly worthy of its inclusion in this bundle. Metacritic has it at an 87, with a user score of 7.7. Steam reviews are very positive. I will definitely be going back to this one. So, I overdid it a little when I dove in to play our next game, Blacktail, and I ended up playing it for 3 hours. It really wasn't the plan, I just wanted to keep pushing to see the next thing. This was another game that I hadn't heard of when the bundle was released, so I decided to jump into the game completely blind. It's another heavily story-driven affair, and I'll just give you the keynotes. You play as Yaga, sister of Zora, and daughter, of Baba. The story starts out with a red oak tree, a place where you and your sister will always be safe. The story then cuts to your sister Zora, who is quote-unquote missing, and you need to go find her. At the same time, you're haunted by images of a hut, your past, mysterious whispers, and above all, a voice. The voice. The way the story is presented through disparate visions and voices inside of your head kind of reminds me of Hellblade: Senua's Sacrifice, although it doesn't take this theme quite as far. Anyway, you wake up from your nightmare, camping in the woods, and you need to get yourself some grub. You start by hunting a deer with your trusty bow and arrow, and then the game shows you how to bring it back and cook it up. Once you've eaten, you set out on a course to find your sister. At this point in the game, I thought that the survival crafting elements would be a key feature, but it really just supplements a far more narrative-driven, handcrafted adventure. I'd really compare it to the likes of Plague Tale Innocence or Plague Tale Requiem, so it's good that this game didn't come out with Plague Tale Requiem in last month's bundle. As you continue, you discover the hut, which is pretty gross and mysterious, but it's actually not so bad because it's where you'll be able to upgrade the skills using the cauldron. You place your mask into a faceless obelisk statue type thing, which summons a sprite of an old friend named Dracoi, who runs away, leaving behind a trail for you to follow. It is important to note that Yaga is faceless, so you always need to wear a wooden mask. As you follow Dracoi on the path, you come to a broken bridge. While attempting to problem solve your way through it, you meet several talking mushrooms. Yaga's heard stories about this before, but she's very surprised to see that those stories are real. And these mushrooms quickly get you up to speed, and you become heavily embroiled in mushroom politics. They'll fix the bridge for you if you get rid of a dragon for them. They're willing to help and will either send you to a Grand Knight mushroom or a Cursed Rogue mushroom, depending on your alignment. Throughout this game, you are frequently presented with opportunities to choose either a light or a dark path, and your morality supposedly plays a big part in the story. In my 3 hours, I'd already felt some of the effects, and I thought that the choices were always interesting and well written. One thing that I found particularly cool is that depending on which mushroom you initially side with, you end up fighting a full boss battle with the mushroom that you don't side with. It was at this point that I hit about an hour, but I really wanted to figure out what was going on with the dragon, so I took care of that. Then the mushrooms opened the bridge, and I had to see what was going on with Dracoi before I launched into a full surreal memory segment complete with a minigame where you play as an angry goat. I'll tell you, this game had its hooks in me, and it would not let go. The gameplay loop is super satisfying. You find items in the world that help you craft upgrades at the cauldron, as well as arrows for your bow and other combat tools. Before I was finished, I ended up unlocking sticky arrows, as well as learning a few magic abilities. Combat isn't amazing, but it's certainly serviceable. Because Yaga is just a little girl, you tend to play more as a stealth archer than anything, but where the combat really shines is its boss battles. They can be challenging, but they're definitely doable. They're slightly puzzle-like, kind of like The Legend of Zelda, and the 3 that I played were all creative and interesting. My only real complaint that I struggle a bit with is the tone of the game. It's trying to be a horror game, and it succeeds at certain points, but then it's mixed with layers of fairy tale cuteness that add perhaps just a bit too much levity. I don't love horror games, so I don't mind this so much, but this atonality seeps into the writing as well. Usually, the writing's pretty good, but sometimes someone just says something uncanny or will try to make a joke, even though it's not the time and place or really that kind of game. It's just a minor complaint, because overall, I really enjoyed the time I spent with Blacktail, and I'll certainly be continuing. It has a Metacritic score of 80, although the user score rating is a much lower 6.5. Regardless, the Steam reviews are mostly positive, and I'm inclined, at least with what I played, to agree more with the critics on this one. The next game up is Gotham Knights. When this game was released, it was steeped in controversy. Common complaints were, this game's unfinished, it has performance issues, it has bugs, but even the overall gameplay style was widely criticized on this game's launch. Ironically, this game, as well as the new S-Squad game, were both heavily compared to the Batman Arkham games, and they both followed the same sad trajectory of having a rough launch, unfulfilled expectations, and middling review scores. How long do you think it'll take for S-Squad Kill the Justice League to come to Humble Bundle? I'd guess we'll have it within the year. Anyways, I should consider myself fortunate to get to play this game without making the solid $60 investment, which, after nearly 2 years of release, is still this game's full price. A AAA game like this one might not be a good value at $60, but it doesn't mean it can't be a good value as part of a $13 monthly bundle. And from what I played, I was reasonably impressed. This game starts with a 15-minute cutscene. The opening film of this game really covers the premise of Batman is dead through watching his last moments as he fights Ra's al Ghul, clear through his funeral. If you like Batman, it can be a real tearjerker at times, and it was actually probably the favorite part of what I experienced with this game. You then drop in as any one of the Bat Squad. You get to choose between Nightwing, Robin, Red Hood, and Batgirl, and I decided to go with Batgirl because she seemed to have a pretty well-rounded skill set. This game starts immediately with your character doing some detective work. The detective work system is fine, but it's not super intuitive, so immediately trying to figure that out was not my favorite way to come out of such a long cutscene. I was ready to fight some dudes. Fortunately enough, after you investigate the crime scene where a professor was brutally murdered, you leave the university you're investigating and see some quote-unquote freaks causing crime. A lot of people made some just comparisons about the combat system of this game and how it stacks to those of the Arkham games, and while it's not Arkham combat, it's certainly passable. Once you swallow that horse pill, the game's combat's alright, but take it with a big grain of salt. I played for an hour and 20 minutes, just enough to get a taste of this game, but it was still just getting started. Once I beat the freaks, I rode the Batcycle back to the Belfry, had another chunky cutscene before doing a night of patrolling, knocking out some crimes, and eventually sneaking into the Gotham City Police Department to examine the body of a professor. I struggled with the stealth systems a little bit, so I ended up punching a lot of police officers on my way to the morgue, which was interesting. Once you get there, you see Talia al Ghul ensuring that her father, who was the one to kill Batman, truly dies. Once Talia leaves, you do a little investigation on the professor before you hightail it out on the Batcycle back to the Belfry. Overall, with the time that I was able to put in, I saw a lot of good things. Combat feels fine, movement feels fine. I'm not excited to see where the story goes. I do bet that this game would benefit from bringing a co-op partner in, which you can do. Reviews, of course, are pretty middling on this game with a 67 Metascore, a 5.1 user score, and mixed reviews on Steam. For what it is, though, I still think it's a great addition to the bundle. High on Life is the only game that I've ever played before this bundle, back when I had Game Pass. I didn't play it a ton, but what I played today was familiar to me. It's a light-hearted, dark comedy, first-person shooter adventure headed up by Squanch Games. Squanch Games was heavily associated with Justin Roiland of Rick and Morty fame, and as the game released, he was embroiled in quite a bit of controversy, which I feel overshadowed the game launch quite a bit. Roiland's voice and rambly Rick and Morty style comedy is all over this project. The game starts with you playing a 90s-style boomer shooter type game, Buck Thunder 2 Xenoslaughter, where your divorce attorney is constantly talking to you as you slaughter some human-like robotic enemies. Your main character is eventually pulled out of the game where you meet your sister, who quick rips a bit of white powder. She's throwing a party while your parents are out for the weekend and asks you to go outside with her. While you're out there, you notice an alien house teleport in and a bunch of aliens come out. They turn an old man into drugs and they shoot one of their own members for some reason. You pick up his Gatlian, a gun-shaped alien, and go steal a warp drive to get your house to safety. The whole time, your Gatlian gives a wide variety of instructions, commentary, and comedy as you fight through a bunch of grunts. The shooter gameplay in this game is serviceable, and with the warp drive you are able to teleport to Blim City, a big space city. Your gun directs you to look for a bounty hunter. Both times I've played, I've had a really hard time finding him in the city, even once I figured out that he's on a park bench. Once you find him, you'll see your Gatlian's bounty hunter friend, Gene Zaruthian, has fallen on hard times, but you're able to use the bounty hunter equipment in exchange for letting him move into your recently teleported house. Your first bounty is a practice bounty where you go to take on Nine Torg, the leader of a gang of ants in the Undercity. This is a good bit of fun, and while the shooting gameplay is still just serviceable, it starts to open up as you unlock your goop trick shot. You also rescue Knifey, who can stab, but also has a grappling hook, tethering kind of ability. You can even feed your gun Gatterall, because this game's called High on Life, and of course it needs yet more drug references. Now that you have two Gatlians, things can get rather noisy rather quickly, but the chaos is really what makes this game. Nine Torg is a challenging but manageable boss fight. When you go kill her, she's trying to execute her clone, 5 Torg, and you actually get the option to quote-unquote fight her too, which is interesting. Personally, I was a little confused on the pathfinding and where I needed to go, but nonetheless, I did trigger this fun and exciting secret boss fight. After 9 Torque, you get to choose one of 2 targets who are actually part of the G3 cartel, who took over your home planet, and you'll teleport to their levels to go fight them. I picked the first guy, and I was able to check out his really cool and well-designed planet, but I'd hit about an hour of gameplay at this point and decided it was time to move on. Let me first say that I love that this game was made. It's a more linear, level-based shooter in a sea full of open-world games, which makes this game seem manageable. It also prioritizes comedy, relying on the Rick and Morty / Solar Opposites brand of sci-fi comedy, but it's pretty funny. You meet these 2 door guards, one red and one blue, on your way to the Undercity, and they ask you which one of them you would hypothetically ask out on a date. Depending on your answer, one door will open and the other will close. They both go to the same place. They have no inherited advantage or disadvantage other than letting you play a part in their funny little scene. High on Life has a 67 on Metacritic, with the user score being much higher at 7.8. The discrepancy in review scores revolves primarily on how well the comedy sticks, which it either works or it doesn't. If you like Rick and Morty, you'll probably like this. If you don't, you probably won't. It's got a Steam review status that's very positive, again because if this game is for you, it resonates. Anyway, great addition to the bundle. Our last game is finally our headliner, Sifu. Sifu is a third-person combat brawler relying on cool martial arts action, tight combat, and a quest for revenge. I'd compare the combat to something like Sekiro or Dark Souls just in terms of difficulty, depth, and the many times you will die in pursuit of mastery. The game starts with you playing as Yang as you make your way through a dojo to take down its master, Sifu. In an Assassin's Creed 3 Haytham Kenway style plot twist, the prologue has you playing as the villain. While Yang takes down the master Sifu, you start your main character's quest for revenge. It's a cool way to do the prologue, and it fits really well here. The game is then divided into different districts that you need to complete, taking down 4 mini-bosses before you can take on Yang. The first area, the squats, is simple enough. You fight your way through a variety of enemies, trying not to die before you make it to the first boss, the botanist. Inevitably, you will die, but each time you get right back up, only now you've aged a little bit. For every year older you get, your damage goes up, but your health goes down. Eventually, after you hit about the 70 years old mark, if you die, you'd need to start over from the beginning. I was able to beat this level on my first go-round, but I was 44 years old by the time I was finally able to take down the botanist. I went into the second level, the club, but I was already 44 years old, so I didn't make it very far. This meant that I needed to redo the squats just a little bit better so I could start the club with a younger character. This is this game's core premise. One nice thing is that as you explore a level, you can find certain things that make the game easier. I found the keys for a door that was locked on my first playthrough, and this cut out a big portion of this level. This shortcut is a nice way to help reduce the lives I would have lost, which in turn should give me a better starting point when I'm ready to go back to the club. It doesn't really matter too much though, because I'm not very good at this game. I've had fun beating people up, using the weapon system, and exploring the handcrafted environments. I can tell that this game is great, but you need to be willing to put in the time to master the combat system, just like any real martial art. Its Metacritic score is an 81, with the user score being 8.0, and the Steam reviews are very positive. There's a great game here, and this game is definitely worthy of being the headliner. It just doesn't quite resonate with me. Now that I've gone through each game of the bundle, I want to do a little overall analysis, starting with the value proposition. You can see on screen the games with their high and low prices using data from SteamDB, so this is just their lowest Steam sale value. And overall, this bundle feels like a good deal. The full MSRP price to buy all of these games is 8 cents shy of $240, with the lowest sale prices added together still being $106.89. The $13 bundle price undercuts the lowest sale price for Sifu, High on Life, Astral Ascent, and Universe for Sale. In terms of financial value, this bundle is a good one. But that only matters if the games are any good, which this month they are. I'm justifiably in a position to give you my subjective ranking, which means we're going to skip D tier and go right to C tier with This Means Warp. It's a fine game, but I played what I played and I won't be going back. If you've got a couple friends who love FTL and would jump into this with you, I'm sure you'll have a good time, but for me, it's a mid-tier game. Next is Diluvian Ultra. I like the vibe of this one, although frankly, it's not that unique compared to what else is in the flooded boomer shooter market right now. The controls never quite clicked with me, so personally, I'll be going elsewhere if I need a boomer shooter fix. Now, up to the B tier with Universe for Sale. It's a visual novel. Not usually my thing, but this one has a really cool aesthetic and has set up some mysteries that I'm excited to see resolved. I'm not sure that I'm ready to sit through the rest of this one quite so soon, but I'm glad to get this type of game in a humble bundle. I'm going to put Gotham Knights at the top of the B tier. I enjoyed what I played, although I know I'm only scratching the surface. Fighting through the detective work and bulky UI kept me from bringing this game up to the A tier, but I love that you can play as 4 different characters following in Batman's footsteps. I'm planning on playing a few more hours of this until I hit the open world fatigue/boredom, and then I'll probably switch over to Batman Arkham Knight. Our A tier is pretty busy today. I'm going to start with High on Life. It's an okay shooter with a specific brand of comedy and a heavy dose of irreverent world building. As a full product, High on Life is greater than the sum of its parts. I'm happy to own it now, and I'll be jumping back in when I have the time. Next up is Sifu. I know for a lot of people, this game is the whole reason to buy this bundle, and that's great. I love that, but Sifu really isn't it for me. It's a good game, I can see that, and I definitely had fun diving in and beating up a bunch of people using its very satisfying combat. I know it's an A-tier game, worthy of its first billing status, but in terms of personal ranking, I just don't have the motivation to dissect its complicated combat and dive in right now. Moving right along is the black sheep sleeper hit of the bundle for me, Blacktail. I got hooked by the narrative, and I always get sucked into being a sneaky archer in Skyrim, so it's cool that I can do that here in a different fairy tale environment. The Baba Yaga myth is cool, and despite the tonal dissonance this game has sometimes, it's enough for me to get through the darker, more horrifying sections of the game. I can't wait to play more. Topping the bundle for me this month, and the final game of the A tier, is Astral Ascent. I'm a big roguelike guy, so while I'm a bit predisposed to lean towards roguelikes as my favorite, I'm also more critical of their systems. I have my nitpicks with Astral Ascent, but the combat is cool, and the blending of genre inspirations with Hades and Dead Cells especially work nicely in tandem, and the key thing is that all of these systems are well executed. The pixelated, almost Studio Ghibli-style artwork is a nice touch, and I'll certainly be exploring more of what this game has to offer. 4 A's, 2 B's, and 2 C's make for a pretty strong bundle overall. Nothing jaw-droppingly good for me, but I don't think there are any real duds in this bundle either. It's also rare that I don't already own any of the games included in a bundle, so I enjoyed that this month. I think there are a good mix of games here. Roguelike, FPS, boomer shooter, visual novel. Nothing seems to have too much overlap, so there's definitely something here for everyone. Sifu seems like a specifically good counter to Gotham Knights. People were very critical of Gotham's combat, and for those people, they can try the highly lauded combat-focused Sifu. It's definitely got its hidden gems with Blacktail, Universe for Sale, and maybe even Astral Ascent if you can call it a hidden gem, but this bundle also has big names, again, like Gotham Knights, High on Life, and Sifu. Overall, I give August's humble choice an A. I'm much happier with this bundle than I've been in a while, so I should get back to playing the games. Thank you for checking out my video. Like it if it helped you out, and subscribe if you want to see more. Have a great day. I'm going to go play Astral Ascent.